First thing that hit people wasn't a headline or a mugshot. It was a voice. Calm. Measured. Almost impossibly steady for someone speaking from a federal block. The call slid into a live stream and the room went quiet. Fans leaned closer. You could hear the weight between sentences, like each word had to fight its way through concrete and steel before it touched air. He didn't brag. He didn't beg. He thanked people. He spoke about keeping his head right. And in that soft tone, you could hear the grind of a man trying to carry his entire world on a phone line. That sound grabbed attention because it felt like the first true glimpse inside. Not a rumor, not a blog, not a blurred screenshot passed around at 2 a.m. This wasn't a clip built for views. This was the human part of a story that for months had been told in numbers, acronyms, and case captions. The kind of story where names get replaced by initials and real life gets flattened into Exhibit A. On paper, it looks stark. Federal prosecutors say the fuse was lit years earlier, when grief and rivalry mixed like fuel. In their telling, a feud hardened after a death that rocked the drill scene. They claim it turned into planning, travel, and an ambush at an LA gas station near the Beverly Center. The target lived, his cousin didn't. And that one night, they argue, transformed old pain into a new federal charge. The government's pages read with the cool finality of a ledger. Flights bought, rooms booked, ski masks purchased, calls made, receipts stacked. The names are cleanly typed. The word machine gun lands like a full stop. But the paper version of any life is never the full thing. He pleaded not guilty. He showed up in court, and even when prosecutors tried to drag lyrics into the case, that move got cut back. For a moment, it looked like the debate might shift. Then the judge said something else mattered more, the behavior inside. Reports that he used other inmates' phone accounts, that he kept talking when rules said stop, that three-way calls slipped through even when the system tried to lock them down. Bail denied. Doors stayed closed. The calendar kept moving, and suddenly a trial date wasn't a date. It was a mirage on a road that kept bending. Inside, days don't pass. They stack. And the place he's in is infamous for making time feel heavier. MDC Los Angeles has been called a lot of things, the worst of them by federal judges themselves. Words like barbaric have landed in formal opinions. It's the kind of setting where a single phone call can feel like oxygen. You ration it, you defend it, and you replay it in your head long after the line goes dead. People on the outside wonder why that voice sounded so level. Maybe because when noise is constant, silence is the only luxury you get to choose. That's why the phone clip rattled people. He didn't talk like a star who lost his shine. He talked like someone who knows that quiet discipline is the only wall the system can't tear down. Little details slipped out. Gratitude, prayer, spiritual focus. Habits that feel small until they're all you have. Fans called it growth. Critics called it PR. But people who have done time called it survival. Meanwhile, the internet kept spinning. Every post became a clue. Every sealed document became a treasure map. Screens lit up with questions about who flipped, who stayed solid, who wore a wire, and who just wanted an extra 15 minutes. Some of those claims were smoke. Some were sparks. Most were heat without light. That's the part people forget. Courtrooms don't run on rumor. They run on what the judge allows a jury to hear. Whole universes die at the edge of that rule. If you pull back from the noise, there's a simpler picture. One side says revenge, cold, planned, and funded. The other side says assumption, connections stacked so tightly they're starting to look like certainty to people who were never in the room. Between those two frames is the only truth that matters in a courtroom. Not guilty until 12 strangers say otherwise. And yet, you can't tell this story without the part that isn't legal at all. The culture runs on loyalty. It always has. Stand on it isn't a phrase, it's a code. When someone you loved becomes a mural, there's a kind of pressure that fame multiplies. Fans expect you to be the armor. The city expects you to be the proof that pain can turn into something that feeds families, not cycles. The moment the news breaks that a brother is gone, Every choice after that gets judged twice, first by the neighborhood and then by the internet. That double court never rests. So the prosecutors cast it as a chain reaction. Grief turns to plans, plans turn to plane tickets, and plane tickets turn to gunfire. The defense calls it a story stitched from coincidences, clout, and the kind of proximity that makes an artist a magnet for everybody's moves. Somewhere in that space, the truth waits its turn. The wildest part? Even while the case ballooned, the voice on the phone didn't shift into panic. He sounded like somebody who learned to shrink a day down to a set of rituals. Pray, read, breathe, lift, call, sleep. Repeat. People change in there. Some harden, some hollow out. A few find a center they never had on the outside. If you listened closely, you could hear which path he was choosing. The calendar kept slipping. October turned to maybe, and maybe turned to next year, and next year flirted with the year after. Lawyers talked about complexity, discovery, evidence dumps measured in hundreds of thousands of pages. The kind of case that eats time before it eats anything else. For the fans, that felt like punishment without verdict. For the government, it looked like thoroughness. For him, it meant more concrete, more phones, and more chances to break a rule he's already been scolded for breaking. It's easy to think the internet's version is the real one. Memes of a man eating fast food in an interview room, captions cracked into jokes, betrayal sliced into digestible bites. But if you step back, the laughs land weird. Cooperation isn't a punchline in the places that shaped him. It's a sentence that lasts longer than most bids. That's why the conversation feels so hot, and why the certainty online always arrives a little too fast. So where does that leave the story? Somewhere more complicated than hero or villain. Somewhere between a life that made him a symbol and a system that turns symbols into targets. The question isn't whether he's perfect. He's never claimed that. The question is whether the lines on those pages add up to proof, or if they're just a map drawn by people who think they already know the destination. The voice on that call didn't ask for sympathy. It asked for focus. It sounded like a man who understands that once a case goes federal, your name becomes a headline you don't control. Maybe that's why he sounded so calm. Because control, right now, only lives in the size of each breath and the rhythm of each day. Because beyond the noise and the narratives and the timelines that keep changing, there's only one place the story actually ends. Under fluorescent lights, in a room where 12 people decide what the last chapter will be. Until then, everyone else is just guessing, and that's the part worth remembering. If this is loyalty sharpened into something reckless, then a jury will say so. If it's a legend swallowed by a machine that never forgives where you're from, the world will learn that in a quieter way, one not built for trending tabs. Either way, the call that started this conversation will echo longer than any headline. Not because it was sensational, but because it sounded like a human being trying not to break. So, ask yourself, when grief, loyalty, and reputation collide with a federal indictment, what would your voice sound like on the one phone call everyone hears?